Hello and welcome back. This is Michael Jackson with The Other Side of the Cell. And tonight, I think I'm gonna call this one David and Goliath. It's about prison fights, prison disputes. And this particular story is one of a David and Goliath situation. It was back in the early 2000s. I worked on a unit. It was called a behavior unit. And in prison, sometimes you have to group inmates by their behaviors. And also in prison, you have to understand that inmates, just like out in the real world, you have people that have power and strength rule. Same way in prison. In prison, if you are physically strong and you are dominant, you tend to be able to run something. But in this case, it takes a twist. On this particular situation, there's a huge physically statured person, and then there's a smaller guy. And in this unit, it was an 80-man unit, and you had 2 tiers, and it was a cell block, and there were single cells and double cells. So basically, on the bottom row, on the left and right side, on the right side, you had all single cells. When you come back around and go up to the other side, they were all double cells. And then on the upper tiers, they were all singles. To give you a little background, you had a smaller white guy whose name was Joey, I believe. And Joey was in for murder. And in West Virginia, you have 2 types of sentencing for murder. You have life with, and that's with mercy, and life without. In my facility, you could only house life with mercy, which means you had a parole date. Life without mercy means you're gonna die. In prison, you're never getting out. And your out date's like 3,000, the year 3,000, whatever. But anyway, Joey had a murder charge. He was in there for shooting somebody. But like I say, he had life with mercy, so he had a parole date. The parole dates usually run 15 years at sentencing, when you're sentenced with life with mercy. So Joey's probably about 5'8", 5'9", maybe 120, 125 pounds. At the tip top, he might have been 130 pounds. The other guy was a huge black guy. And I'm talking about 6'3", probably 240, 250. And I always called him Devo because he reminded me of that character. So Devo was a bully. And he bullied everybody he could bully because just his physical stature got him through a lot of things. He didn't have to fight much because he was so big, nobody really wanted to jump on him. I called him Zero because he was like 0 for 20 in fights. He couldn't fight a lick. He was just big. So every time he got into an actual fight, he lost because he was so big, he couldn't fight because he was so just physically big neck, big arms. He was not agile at all. So when he fought, he couldn't get his arms to protect himself, so people got up inside of him and lit him up. But anyway, this particular 2 individuals, they didn't like each other because they were just so different. Joey tried to manage by just avoiding the guy, leaving him alone, not having any contact with him at all, try to be as respectful as possible, stay out of his range, don't cross his path. But Zero, he was from Detroit, and he was like out of place because you're in rural West Virginia, penitentiary, prison, and he hated being there. On a daily basis, Zero would always bully the TVs. People watching TVs, he'd take the remote, change the channel, bully the microwave, trying to, tell people that they couldn't use a particular microwave or whatever. So he had a reputation that he was hated by everyone, blacks, whites, everybody, staff, officers. Nobody liked him because he was just an asshole. He's a straight asshole. Zero kept bullying Joey and kept bullying him. He'd take his tray at chow or make him give him food off his tray. And he was just a menace. So this went on for several months. And finally, I guess, Joey just snapped one day. And he just said, in his mind, I got to do something about it. Enough's enough. I can't take it no more. Prior to that, he had come to staff and asked to be moved, wanted to be moved off the unit, but because of his classification, he couldn't be moved. And classification is when you come into a prison system, a case manager evaluates your charges, your age, and they have a formula and they classify you. You're either a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. 1 being the lowest classification, 5 being the highest. On that unit, since there were single cells, if you were classified a 5, you had to be up there. Didn't matter, you had to be housed in a single cell. You couldn't live with anybody. Well, these two individuals were both 5, so they had to be there, and there was no alternative for them to be housed anywhere else. Joey had been taking this brutal bullying and just it just would never stop because Zero was just an asshole. He felt that he could do that to anybody, nobody's going to do anything about it. This was on a Sunday morning, and Sunday mornings are usually really quiet. Nothing goes on because the inmates sleep in. It's a weekend, they don't want to do nothing. And chow in prisons usually called like at 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock. The doors usually roll, and what we mean by that is, they're locked down all through the night. And in the morning, when it's almost time to call chow, they roll the doors. So all the doors roll on the top tier and the bottom tier, and they open so that they can go to chow. And when you go to chow, at that time, you got dressed and you exited the pod, and you went downstairs to what was called the crossover, and there was 2 chow halls that housed about, you could put 100, 200 guys in there. But anyway, so they rolled the doors that morning to call for chow. It was a Sunday morning. It was in the winter time. It was cold. The ground had snow on it. It was cold out in the day room area because they had the windows open. It was just a Sunday morning routine. So inside what we call the bubble is the control center. You can see out into the pod. And when you look out into the pod, you can see all the top tiers. You can see all the 80 cells. In this particular case, the pod area, or the open common area, you had 3 TVs in the back on the wall, and you had 2 TVs that came down on a pole at the closer end to the control center. And then you had 2 microwaves on the bottom tier, and you had a microwave on the top tier. So that particular morning, it was before we had a lot of cameras in the institution. So this is just basically eyeballing things. So your job as a staff person, correctional officer, is to make sure you're always kind of monitoring what the inmates are doing. So that particular morning, myself and the 2 correctional officers, because there's always 2 correctional officers on that unit. One mans the bubble and one is out making rounds around the pod. That particular morning, everybody was in the control room. We called chow. A couple people went to chow. Mostly nobody got out of bed. At that particular morning, Joey had been up early, waiting for the doors to roll. He comes out, and they have red coats, like a winter red coat. It's not much of a winter coat. It's not very thick, but it's a red coat. And they wear khaki pants and state boots, which are just black fake Timberlands, basically what they are. So anyway, Joey comes out. He's dressed like that, and we notice that he's doing a lot of pacing. He comes down off the top tier, comes down the steps, is walking around, goes back up, walks around. He's pacing a lot. So generally, a lot of guys get up in the mornings like that, and they have a plastic cup, and they make coffee. What he's doing that morning is really not out of the ordinary. Nobody's really paying a lot of attention to it. And So it's business as usual, basically. But what we didn't know is that was the morning that Joey decided to make a stand for himself. So what he did was he prepared his weapon. And we'll get into what his weapon is as we go along. But what he did was he took his coffee cup and mine is probably about that high. It's a pretty decent sized coffee cup. So what he does is he takes some baby oil and he puts probably that much of baby oil in the cup. And he also goes to one of the black guys and gets the blue hair gel that black people put in their hair. So he's got baby oil and he's got the hair gel, and he takes it. At that time, we didn't know what he was doing, but he takes that concoction and he goes to the microwave. Now, mind you, this is not nobody's alarm because it's just him. We think it's him taking coffee and putting it in the microwave. He takes and puts that into the microwave. He microwaves that for 5 minutes. Now, 5 minutes in a microwave is turning that into basically lava. So he takes that baby oil and the hair gel, and then he puts Vaseline in it. So what he's doing is he's making a kind of a sticky type, heated like lava. So after he does the first 5 minutes, he adds the Vaseline to it. And then he cooks it some more. And as he's cooking this stuff, he's pacing. And we didn't figure all this out until after, because there was 1 or 2 cameras at that time. So there was kind of a camera that shot out on the common areas. So he cooks it for a total of 9.5 minutes. And I don't know if you've ever microwave coffee or microwave anything for 60 seconds, 90 seconds. You know how hot it's going to get. He did it for 9 minutes and 30 seconds. And after it finished, his cell was on the top tier, clear at the end. Zero's cell was in the middle. The microwave was in between. So after he did his final lap on the top tier and it went ding and it was finished, he goes to the microwave and takes it out. And it's so hot, he can't hardly handle it. So he takes a toboggan and he wraps it around the handle. And then he proceeds down to Zero's cell. And after that, he just opens the door and he takes that concoction and throws it. And he hits him in the face. And all you heard was a blood-curdling scream of, I'm dying. And he's screaming and he's screaming and he can't take it. And we're sitting in the control and we're like, what is going on? It sounds like somebody just got killed. And we take off. Boom, 2 of us go out of the control center, hit the day room, and up the stairs we go, get to the cell. When we got to that cell, I want to tell you, it was like something out of a horror movie. But lucky for Zero, the way he was laying in the cell, when he threw the hot liquid, and I'm gonna call it lava, it skipped. And most of it went above his head and landed on the wall. But any of it that touched his skin, and you gotta remember, Zero was a very dark complected black guy. Anything that touched his skin, it took all the meat off of it, and it was clear white down to the several layers to his skin. If he would have had his head up or turned any way, he would have blinded him. It did get his eyes, and it did get that side of his face, and it did blind him in one eye. He's lucky he wasn't up and it caught him in the front of his face, or he would have been completely maimed and scarred for life. So we rush in, we get him, and there's nothing we can do as far as stopping what happened, because it's already on him. And it just, if you ever seen wax or anything like that, once it gets on you, it's just stuck there. And if we would have wiped it, we would have took his skin off with it, because he had serious burns. And he's screaming, and my God, oh God, he killed, they killed me, and he doesn't even know who did it, because he was asleep. And Joey just walks down to his cell and goes in the cell and shuts the door and locks himself in the cell. So we call for medical. The nurses get up there. They're like, they're treating him. We get him off. We get him to medical. Medical takes over, does their thing. They end up life flightening him to the medical center about an hour or so away from the facility. After he's secured and off, we go to Joey's cell. When we open the cell door, we secure him, cuff him up, got to handcuff him, secure him, pat him down, make sure he doesn't have any other weapons. And as we're escorting him off, we're like, what did you do? Why did you do that? And he said, listen, I couldn't whip him, so I had to get an equalizer, and I wanted to kill that mother. And I'm like, you realize that you're probably going to get outside charges. And he said, what can you do to me? I already got a life sentence. After that, of course, they take him and secure him and take him to segregation, lock him up. They take him to the hospital. He goes to the burn center. He's in the burn center for a little while. They end up transferring him out of the facility because they didn't want to have both of those inmates in the same facility. Joey, they ended up transferring him to a higher level facility, our maximum security facility. And he ended up in what they call the quality of life. And that's a program for inmates that do heinous things to other inmates. Whatever you see prison violence like that, it changes you as a staff person. It also traumatizes the inmates too, because the inmates that did see the guy come out of the cell, they saw, a horrible sight of somebody with their face melted off the side and screaming in excruciating pain. You have to understand that in prison, there's no rules, there's no mercy, nobody cares. So a guy like Joey had to do what he had to do just for the simple fact of survival. Prison, you can't be a punk, you can't be perceived as weak, and you can't be perceived as somebody that's going to be allows people to bully you and stuff like that. So in the process, Joey ended up getting a lot of respect because people realized that they couldn't mess with him because, number one, he was in there for murder. Number two, he'd figure out a way to hurt you. And it was a good lesson to be learned because, like I say, in prison, there are no rules as far as prison culture, and respect is big. And he allowed this guy to disrespect him for such a long period of time. The other inmates were also trying to punk him out and disrespect him because he was taking it from this guy. The way he gained that all back is he did something so horrible and so over the top that people understood, you better not mess with this guy because he's a psychopath. And he may be little, but he's a murderer. And there's a difference between fighters and killers in prison. We got another video for that coming. But the thing about it is you have to show respect in prison. Not only staff people, but inmates too. I thought this would be an interesting story, and people ask me all the time about fights and violence and bullying and all that kind of stuff in prison. I thought this would be a good one for you. Next time we'll get into some more stuff. But until next time, like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate your support, and we'll do another one here shortly. and hopefully it'll be on the topic that you want to hear about. Keep the comments coming, keep the suggestions coming, because every time you make a suggestion and comment, I'll take it to heart, and then we'll look up some information, and I'll try to jog my memory banks to figure out a story that will pertain to whatever you want us to talk about. Thank you, and God bless.